welcome to another episode of the Running Tales podcast, part of the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network here on Run, Try, Bike. Now, this week I would normally about this time yada on about how we've got 7 amazing podcasts as part of this network, about how Running Tales also has a Substack platform, about how we're part of Run, Try, Bike, and all that kind of stuff, and about how you should like and subscribe us. However, what I really want to talk to you about now is one of our other shows that I've just been listening to this afternoon, and it's the What's in Your Earbuds show. Because listen, guys, I could talk about all the other stuff, but this is kind of more important, and you really ought to listen to this show, because What's in Your Earbuds is normally a bit of fun. It's talking about what people listen to when they're running, but the latest episode I've listened to was called the Sobriety Music Roundtable. And it's the co-hosts of that particular show, Gandhi and Joe Harden, who also has his own amazing podcast, Beyond the Finish Line, on this network. And they were talking about not only their sobriety journey, but the sobriety journeys of the guests, 4 or 5 amazing guests that they had on there during this roundtable. And it is one of the rawest and the most interesting podcasts that I've heard in a long time, talking about the importance of running and countering sobriety, just the amazing journeys that they've been through to get to where they are now. And you see these people and they're doing unbelievable running things. I mean, one group of them is going to do a 1,800 mile run from Washington to San Antonio. It's unbelievable what they're doing. They talk about the songs that they've chosen. There's some great songs in there. Of course they do. It's What's in Your Earbuds. But what I really wanted to try and get across was the raw emotion and feeling that they do, and how amazing people, how you might see them now, have this backstory of pain and addiction, and they've managed to turn that around in the most fantastic way. So listen, that is my recommendation for today. Go and check out the Sobriety Music Roundtable on What's on Your Earbuds with Owen and Joe, because it's just sensational stuff, guys, and you really should listen to it. And it actually, to a degree, factors into the story that we're going to be telling today on Running Tales, because we're going to be speaking to Owen Jones, and Owen has his own sobriety journey as well. He's written about it in a book that he's done, and it's something that he's very passionate about. But I'm also kind of struck by how Owen and other people with these journeys are so much more than simply their sobriety journey, because Owen's done some amazing running in his own right, and I love one story that hopefully he'll tell us about how he did one ultra, never felt like doing it again, and then the next minute he's out in the pool running a 5-day ultra marathon through the Himalayas. So yeah, without any further ado, let's get Owen forward, and we'll have a chat to Owen about his story. And yeah, I mean, I suppose let's just touch on that sobriety journey to start with, Owen. We'll maybe I don't want to say the words get out of the way, but you know what I mean. We'll talk about it, because I mean, I suppose my first question is, you had this addiction, and yet for a long time you were still doing some incredible running, I think, including a sub 4-hour marathon.
Yeah, I was, and I think I kind of I was a functioning alcoholic, most definitely. I would drink a lot every night. I mean, towards the end, I mean, a lot is an odd thing to say, because some people say it was a bottle of vodka or it was a bottle of wine or something. And I don't think that matters too much. It was a lot for me, and that was on my journey. And I would have, for instance, what I chose as my hangover route, driving to work, rather than the normal route. So I knew which way to go when I was feeling a bit rough. But all this time, and I was getting to work and I was functioning, I was maybe nipping out towards the end. I was nipping out at lunchtime for a drink so I could feel better into the afternoon. Come the evenings, I would go off to boot camp. I'd go for a run, but on the way back from boot camp or from a run, I would go to the off license and buy a bottle or 2 of wine, get home, have a shower, and then drink those before the next day. So it was a bizarre existence where I was reasonably, I guess, fortunately, reasonably physically fit, but mentally up the creek. And it got worse and worse. I think in the last year or so, up until I quit about 4 years ago, in the last year or so, it was getting very messy and heading to a point where I could potentially lose everything.
Yeah.
Job, wife, family, kids, the lot. And my running kind of declined. Yes, I'd kind of got my PB that I wanted at a time I wanted to. And I'd always set myself, from starting to run 10, 11 years ago now, a target of running at least one marathon a year. And I'd done that, and it was getting to the point where I hadn't done one in December. Oh, I better get one done.
Yeah.
Which was, I just couldn't. Looking back on it, I think, how bizarre is that? But I'm sure people who are listening, who have battled with drink, will understand that the most bizarre decisions seem completely normal, and you just go with the flow with that. And so, yes, I was drinking whilst running and doing my boot camps. And in a sense, you know, I used to, looking back on it, doing that gave me an excuse to get out of the house and swing by the off license, because otherwise I'd be in and it would be a matter of, I've got to go out. What are you going out for? Well, I'm going to boot camp. And I happened to come back with my supply.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's an odd one.
Well, I mean, you know, we can't second guess addiction, can you? And it does funny things to you, I suppose. And I mean, one thing I'm sort of interested about that is you know, were you giving out any signs that perhaps your fellow runners, fellow boot campers might have been able to spot, and that maybe other people in that situation are themselves giving out now?
On the whole, I guess not, because the drinking was done at home.
Yeah.
I wasn't out and about. The giveaways were really, I guess there was one very messy Christmas party at boot camp where I think I was carried by 3 or 4 people back to the room and laid out on my bed, and I woke still in my DJ and a bit messy. I mean, I kind of brushed that aside as I was that happens from time to time, but it doesn't, does it? So that was getting towards the end, sort of 6-8 months before the end, when things were getting out of control, and I was kind of struggling with having tried various techniques to quit, working out and almost giving up on it, until a fortuitous event basically happened to me, and I managed. I kind of say I quit overnight after 20 years of trying. At some point, you have to put down that last glass. But yeah, it was really starting to affect life at home, and it was starting to affect. It was working. It was affecting life at work, because all I was doing was just trying to get through the day rather than progress.
Yeah,
I just managed to get through and do the bare minimum, but that started suffering too. And I quit. I remember quitting one job and looking back on it. That was why I was running away. I was running away.
What was this incredible event that eventually helped you to you know, kick the habit, I suppose?
The incredible event was incredibly minor. It was just a neighbour coming to talk to me while I was having a drink on a Sunday, getting over the Saturday, and I'd just gone in for one to make sure, to get myself back on a level. But once you've had that one, you think, oh, there's nobody around, I'll have another one, and by then you've had it. I don't know what he said to me, because I was drunk, but whatever it was, it became what I describe as the final piece in my quitting jigsaw. So I see it as I have a personal jigsaw, or I had a personal jigsaw that I needed to solve, and it had to be the pieces from my jigsaw that went into it to solve it. This amazing event is only an amazing event because it happened to be that last piece that slotted in perfectly and completed my jigsaw. That conversation was the moment I stopped drinking. Really, it may seem nothing,
but as you say, for you, absolutely incredible. And I know that the whole journey you took afterwards you kind of chronicled it in your first book of two. We'll, I'm sure, touch on the second one later. But that was losing my addiction, which I've as you know, I've read myself. I do need to catch up with 862 to Kathmandu. But yeah, losing my addiction, where you're incredibly honest about the journey of recovery you took, and the part, to a degree, that running also played in that.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I wrote that. Well, I quit drinking in I say the September before lockdown. Looking at that now, it's actually it has quite great significance in that lockdown came at the point where I was 6 months sober.
Yeah.
6 months is a point at which, looking back on it now, you can think you've cracked it and you're safe, and therefore relax. Now, the problem with lockdown was, as we all know, is that everybody was stuck at home. Work kind of slowed. You didn't have to show up at work. You could sort of sit in front of your laptop in your gym jams and a shirt, and you could feel rough as heck. And quite a lot of people just turned their cameras off.
Yeah.
So, and alcohol sales skyrocketed. Now, it could have been so easy for me to fall back, thinking 6 months in, I'm okay. I haven't got any responsibility. I haven't got to show up. I've just got to wiggle the mouse every now and then to show that I'm online. I took a different view at that point and actually made a decision when we didn't know how long it was going to last. I think the first one was going to be 6 weeks.
Yeah. How wrong were we all?
And how wrong we were. So I decided actually that I ought to just start chronicling, just put together a little blog about thoughts I was having about quitting drinking. And then the time extended, obviously, in lockdown. And the bizarre thought of actually, I'm going to write a book about this, because there's a massive amount of stuff that I've got here. And you know what? Somebody might read something that I've written and benefit from it. So I've got to do that. And so I during that time, I was setting my alarm for 5 a.m, getting some exercise and meditation done, and then writing for an hour and a half every day before work. And that was a heck of a routine. It was, as it turns out, a massive help for me, myself, quitting, because it took a good year, 18 months to get this project done. And because I knew it wasn't just for me, I was doing this to help other people. And if it only ever helps one person, it's been worth it. That really got me through that time. And I'm delighted I did it. And I'd quite like, when possible, to get out there and get out there and speaking to groups and help them, seeing if there's anybody I can help.
Yeah, definitely. I know that's a big thing for you, is to kind of pay it forward, I guess, and use the experience you've had to help other people who are in your situation to make a similar recovery. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, I've been through something, learned from it. I'm not going to. It's almost like a duty to help to give that forward, because it would just seem wrong to hang on to it. There's stuff in the book I know that people will vehemently disagree with, that they will question, they may disbelieve, but that's me. It's my story, and if there's one or two things in it that work out of the 300 that are there, then 298 I'm not going to use to you. But if one or two are, it's worth it.
100%. And I know I've listened to a few people, a few runners who've spoken about their sobriety journeys, and yeah, it's what works for individuals, whether that's going to, I don't know, therapy, whether that's taking up running, whether that's just doing a cold turkey or whatever, and it is entirely different for each and every person in that situation.
Absolutely, and it's interesting on that point. I mean, when I was trying to stop, and a lot of advice out there, which I now disagree with, is that in order to fill, there's a gap that's left when you quit drinking. There's time and there's effort and all sorts of stuff. Let's say for 3 hours a night I'm drinking. Now I'm not. What am I going to do with those 3 hours? There's a lot of advice is to find something to do to fill that.
Yeah.
Now the difficulty, I didn't do that, which was brilliant, because what happened was that what was already within me, that I knew that I enjoyed and wanted out of life, was allowed to come to the surface.
Yeah.
And fill that gap out of me. Now, if I decided, for instance, okay, I'm not going out, I'm not drinking this evening, so I'm going to go and take up carpentry or whatever. I could have tried that to fill the gap, but I may have been rubbish at it and got really angry. Now, now for an alcoholic, being rubbish and angry tends to lead to one thing.
Yeah.
Drinking.
Yeah.
So I just left a gap and allowed what was naturally within me to bubble up and fill that gap. So it was going to work. I wasn't going to have a battle with it or dislike it.
Yeah. And presumably one of those things was going back to doing more running.
One of those things was running. Absolutely. Yeah. Joining a running club, getting out to meet more people. I mean, I spent, whilst initially trying to quit, I spent quite a lot of time in AA meetings talking about drinking. And I kind of wanted to stop drinking, to stop having alcohol in my life, and I found that kept it in there. However, going off to the running club and getting out and running, you're completely away from it, which is what I needed, and how it really helped.
Yeah. So rewinding a little bit, I suppose, to I guess the start of your running journey. When did you first start running, and what was it about the sport that made you think, hey, I actually quite like this?
What, running?
Yeah.
Oh, right. Oh man, I'd always looked at runners as I was driving around and walking around, thinking, what is the point of that? You leave your house, you go around in a circle, you come back knackered, and you've achieved what? Because my sports were cricket and hockey, team sports where there's a defined sort of limit to it, and there are rules. And it's over within cricket obviously isn't over in a short. It's a very different thing. There's a ball involved, and you chase it around. And running is just, seemed to me as what's that all about? I just didn't get it. I mean, I was quite into sport and running around and doing things about playing squash. As I said, playing cricket and hockey and that sort of stuff. Running. If it was a training session, we go for a run, it'd be like, oh dear, I've got a bad knee. I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
And so it was never anything that was even part of my thoughts as a way of exercising. Until one fateful day.
Yeah. Well, I was waiting for a but.
Yeah.
This wouldn't be much of a running podcast if there wasn't a but. So yeah. What was that but, and what made you go, hey, this running is not just this horrible bit of torture that I do to make me better at hockey, cricket, or whatever other sport you're doing?
Yeah. What it was is I joined a local gym because actually I'd got a little bit older, and playing hockey I played hockey, had the kids, had a bit of a break, went back to it, and I was older and being skinned alive by these 17, 18-year-olds. And so it had lost its appeal. There was like my mind was there, my body wasn't. And so I thought, I need to keep fit somehow or other. I'll go and join a gym. And I ended up in a spin class.
Yeah.
And being quite competitive, the lady sitting next to me and I started a bit of a sparring contest in the spin classes. And a few weeks later, she came up to me in the main gym while I was on some machine or other doing something, and said, and basically whispered in my ear, I think you've got a marathon in those legs. And then walked off.
And what went through your head at that point? Did you think she was bonkers, or was it a little seed?
Well, by that point, I kind of knew she was slightly bonkers, having been sparring with her in the spin class for a bit of a time. And I just sort of sat there stunned and went, what a bizarre thing to say. How am I going to, why, what? I've got to find a way to say no, because this just isn't me. This just is not me. I've got no experience and no desire.
Yeah.
So I needed to come up with an excuse not to do it. And after a couple of days of ruminating, the only excuse I could come up with was can't be asked. And I knew that was never going to be good enough. So I was snookered immediately. And from that point, I thought, okay, all right, I guess I better do it. And so from nothing, within a matter of a couple of weeks, I'd signed up for a marathon, because I knew that the challenge had been laid down and I wasn't going to back up, and I wasn't going to back away from it, because I couldn't. There was
no, couldn't find the reason. But a marathon is not easy. A marathon's hard. You've got to dedicate a lot of training to it. There's plenty of people to go out and attempt to wing it and come a cropper. So somewhere along the line, you must have, I guess you must have either started to enjoy it, or you've got one hell of a will to keep going through something you hate.
Initially, it was a battle of will. So I started. So I booked this route. So this was in the roundabout in the March, and I immediately I knew that a marathon was going to be horrible. It was going to be tough, and it was really going to push me. I was underloaded. That was true. So my immediate thought process was, if it's going to be grim, then let's do it somewhere wonderful.
Right.
And I love Italy, and I love Florence. So I thought, right, first one, we'll go to Florence. And booked it. And then it was, and really just, I guess, looked at it quite analytically and said, okay, if I'm going to do that, I need to start with a 5K. And my friend said, well, the running tends to go, the distance is double. So you start off with a 5K, then you do a 10.
Yeah.
Then you do a half, then you do a full. They're basically doubling in distance, and just step through those, book one of each at sensible intervals, and build yourself up that way, which is exactly what I did. So when it came to my very first half, that was going to be tough, because that's a long way. It's a really long way.
Yeah.
So I went, right, I've been doing that one in Nottingham. I was at university in Nottingham, so I'll run around Nottingham. So it had something to it, not just, I'll just do it around Northampton. Okay, I live in Northampton. But there was something a bit more to it.
Yeah.
And Florence, there was a bit more to it. So it gave me more than just running to get me through. And so I needed a goal. I needed something a bit special in it. And that was how I did that. Unfortunately, this lady, and it was Emily, who suggested that I had a marathon in my legs, was very kind, and spent hours and hours and hours every Sunday morning running round and round the local reservoir, building up my mileage and taking me through it, and actually produced a training plan for me. So I didn't really have to think. I just had to put one foot in front of another and keep going. And it worked brilliantly. Yeah.
So for anyone listening to this who's wondering who Emily is, so Emily is Emily Moore, who is a previous guest on the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network. He came on here to talk about all the crazy stuff she's done. And if you go back and listen to that episode with Emily, you will realise that when Owen says she's bonkers, she really is. so hello, Emily, if you're listening. But and I imagine that she's also an extremely good motivator as you go around and learn to love this sport.
Absolutely fantastic, and we'll probably come on to that when we're talking about mountains in Nepal later on.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess the next question is, how did Florence and that first marathon go?
The two memories really stick. One was arriving in Florence, and it was myself, and I had tears because I hadn't taken my wife with me, and we'd gone on honeymoon there, and I immediately went, I've messed up.
Yeah.
And then at the end of it, as I was crossing the finish line, and I was listening to music when I was running in those days. I don't now. I just listen to nature. The absolute family favorite track came on as I was crossing the finishing line, and it was. I'd lost my dad a little before this, and it just brought that flooding back, and I was in tears. I was in a state.
Yeah.
It was beautiful and horrible at the same time. There was relief of getting over the finishing line. I think for me there was emotion just in completing this thing. But for that track just to come on as I crossed the line, just threw me, and that is what really sticks with me. It was amazing. It was as if it was meant to be.
Yeah.
The other reason I enjoyed that run was about halfway through, I decided to check my time on my watch, pressed it, stopped it, reset it, and lost the whole lot.
Oh, no.
I've never had a record of it. So about 18 miles in, I ripped my watch off, slammed it onto the pavement, and ground it into the dirt with my heels, and then carried on. People looking, what are you doing? I was like, I've just messed the whole thing up. I've messed it up. Bang! And off I went and carried on.
Have you done Florence again since to get that time somewhere on your Strava or on your watch or whatever?
No, I've given up caring about time.
Yeah.
I got a time I wanted in the race that I wanted. So I set myself the goal quite early on to run sub 4 before I was 50, bearing in mind that I'd only been running about 2 or 3 years then, if that. I was never a runner, not much of a runner, but it just like, wouldn't mind getting that. Once that was out, once that was done, and I stupidly chose London to try that, where it's so easy to get boxed in, and within a couple of miles, your target's gone, and all that training to get that time is blown. Somehow I was lucky enough to get that with about a minute to spare. Which was fine. It still has a 3 at the start of it.
Exactly. Yeah.
That'll do me.
Definitely.
And now I just run to enjoy it. And I don't really care too much about the time, because I've now really fallen in love with running on the trails.
Yeah.
So you never know how long it's going to take. Actually, quite a lot of the time, you don't know how long it's going to be. You go off you run a half and it ends up at 15 miles, or you run a marathon, it's nearer 30, and you go, well, it's on trails. It kind of works that way.
Yeah, I've done a short. I remember doing a short trail run that was supposed to be 10K, and it ended up being 7 3/4 miles. And you think over that short distance they'd be able to get it right, but somehow race directors don't seem to care when it comes to trail runs.
No, they don't. They don't seem to. And sometimes when you're running across a mountain, you can't really take the straight route down.
Actually, that's a good point, because one trail run that I know you really enjoyed was going up and down Snowdon, which is as near as we get a mountain in this country, isn't it?
It is. I love it. I absolutely adore it around there. Yeah, and that was actually the first trail run that I did was it was a trail up in Snowdon in 2015.
Yeah.
Which was an accident. I say it was an accidental race. I wasn't planning on doing it at all, but a friend of a friend dropped out about 3 weeks before, and somebody said, "How do you fancy a ticket? How do you fancy a place on this run?"
Yeah.
Like, oh, I never thought of that. I thought, because running to me at that point was road running, towns and cities and roads, not mountains. I mean, mountains. And foolishly, the way I guess the way the way I do things often is just if I'm going to do it, I'll just go for it.
Yeah.
As the starting of running was, okay, you're going to start running. First thing to do, right? Go straight in for a marathon. Number one, not a runner, book a marathon, go for it. This one, okay, I'm not a trail runner. There's a trail marathon in Snowdonia. It's not a 10K little yomp around the fields. You're going to go up and down the mountains. And I remember going, I was about halfway through, and the couple that were in front of me just stopped, took off their packs, sat down on a couple of rocks, got a picnic blanket out, and started having lunch. And I was like, "What are you doing?" And they were like, "Well, we're out for the day. We might as well enjoy it."
Yeah.
I was like, oh, okay. And carried on to it. Well, of course, they beat me by a couple of hours. Anyway, but it just struck me then that it was a completely different thing, this trail running. You just go out and go and enjoy it. There's no pressure, there's no expectation apart. And at the end of these the runs now, it's, oh, how was the run? And quite often you hear people say, oh, it was right. I did the run in 3:45:23, and I go, I don't care. Now, how was the run?
Yeah. What did you
you
see when you were out there?
Did you enjoy it? What did you see? Yeah, exactly. And that's what I like about it now. And the last one I was, I remember seeing Stoked running along the path. And I was like, well, that's a bit of a highlight. Don't often see that. And that's now the sort of thing that I like about getting out and about into the countryside. And I look at the wildflowers, and I get home. My wife loves nature and wildflowers. Oh, we were on the Ridgeway, and all the orchids in the chalk were fantastic. Said, oh, we ought to go for a walk there one day. Yeah, we will. And that's what it's kind of become a bit more now.
And I know you've been to pretty, aside from Snowdonia, some pretty cool places around when you've been doing some of these trail runs as well. I mean, I suppose what's been your sort of favourite? Maybe we won't talk about Nepal if that is the favourite, but some of your favourite places to go trail running.
I think my favourite is going to be the Black Mountains, which are next to the Brecon Beacons. Now, the Brecon Beacons are pretty full of people. The Black Mountains are devoid of people, really, apart from the runners who are there on the day. And it's the route that the particular run that I've done 2 or 3 half marathons there on it has the sort of high heather moorlands. It's got tough steep climbs where you wonder what on earth you're doing with your life, and then beautiful sort of, as you come off the top of the Black Mountains, there's a massive, it looks like you're hitting the plains of the Serengeti, huge open field with horses and stuff dotted around. And because it's a nice gentle down, you can fly down that. And I literally put my arms out on this run and just shout with happiness going down there. And it became such a great run that for the last couple of years, my wife and I have gone on holiday in that part of the world and walked the mountains. It's a great way of finding new places and getting further. Both of us like walking. You can only get a certain distance in a day when you're walking, but when you're running and somebody else has told you where to go and it's all marked, or you've got your GPS, you get to places you wouldn't know about. And I like that. And I like that part of it. Yeah,
definitely. And I think one thing we find in the UK, I don't know about you, so as I've got older generally, and as I've done more running around, you find that in this slightly crowded small country of ours, that actually we have some absolutely spectacular and unbelievably beautiful places tucked away in the corners and roundabout places you wouldn't expect to find from like you mentioned, Brecon Beacons to places in Devon and Cornwall, and even like in our home in Northamptonshire, just spectacular scenery that, our cousins and friends in America, and I know we've got plenty of who listen to this, have obviously spectacular places sometimes to run in, but we've got sort of more sneaky ones, which I think are equally incredible.
I think you're right, and I mean, I kind of look around the countryside now, and it just seems there's building going on everywhere. However, you just go around the corner from that, and you're right. There's huge swathes of typical old English countryside on our doorstep. And not far. And actually there's a lot more of it than you think. And it is quite easy within, Northampton's being smack in the middle of the country. Within an hour or two, you can be in the middle of nowhere. I mean, the Peak District is only an hour or so up the M1, and turn a corner and find some nice trails around there, and there's nobody around. And you look in all directions, and you can see no sign of man, and it's lovely. And and whichever way you go, whichever direction you go in, you can actually find that.
No, I think that's 100% true. Now, obviously, we've firmly established your love of trails. But
Hmm.
I want to talk to you obviously about ultra marathons, which I know you also have a love of now, but you certainly didn't to start with. Tell everyone about your first experience of being an ultra marathoner.
Oh man. Again, it was never something that was particularly on my mind, but it came up that if I was going to do, okay, I'd done a few marathons, and it was kind of a bucket list idea to do an ultra.
Mm.
And as I said, given my ability to jump into the deep end rather than consider, if I was going to do an ultra, I'd do a proper one. I'm not. I'm not going to. So I decided, okay, I'll do 100k. I'll just go for 100k and do it in a day rather than the 2 day option for race to the stones.
Yeah, which is a
And
tough one.
yeah, it was
Just it.
horrible. It's a tough one. Not having had any experience of doing any others, I realised that yes, and I mean, getting to the halfway point where the food was absolutely diabolical, there not enough of it, and thinking I've got to do that, hold that distance all over again was just, I mean, it was horrible. But you know what? We'd set off at just after 6 in the morning, and as the three of us who trained together in Northampton crossed the start line, Rob very kindly pointed out to us, well, it's only 20 park runs to go. As we started, it was like, thanks, Rob.
Yeah,
That's really what we want to hear. About 5 miles in, as we were running along I think we were running along the banks of the Thames. It might have been 5 or 10 miles in. I kind of lost track of where we were, and mine went a bit squiffy. I remember somebody saying, "It's a bit flat this run, isn't it?" And I was going, "You've got rather a long way to go." She said,
yeah.
"I remember she said, I'd like a few more hills." I was like,
I don't
okay.
think I've ever heard anyone say they like more hills.
Oh, more hills. And then another chap ran past us saying, "Oh, the second half's a bit easier." No, it was twice as hard. It was harder and absolutely shattered. So we'd set off at, as I said, about 6:30 in the morning. And my target was to finish before the sunset. And I think this
Yeah,
race was on the 17th of June, which is about the longest day there is. And I failed spectacularly. It was an hour and a half after sunset that we got back, 15 and a half hours in, and I was broken. The last, I guess, 10, 12 miles, I just wanted to curl up on the side of the track and be picked up and cuddled and taken back home. And just Alan, who I was running with, was with me every step of the way.
yeah,
We trained all the way from the start together, all our long runs, all our back-to-backs, everything we'd run together, and we decided we would stick together come thick or thin. And he was an experienced 100k 100-mile runner,
right. Yeah,
and I didn't know at the time, but I guess it's kind of one of those things that actually he needed me to be there as well to get him through it because he was struggling. And I thought, well, he's the
right.
experienced one; he'll get me through it. In the
Yeah,
end, I think it's odd. I had no idea, but we without each other, neither of us would have managed to do it.
no, no. I
And
mean,
that suddenly changed my view. That changed my view of running. That it
yeah,
was very much more than running. It was the support for one another.
yeah.
Um, but 100k in, that was the end of. I'd done my bucket list ultra, and that was it. No way would I get 100. I mean, a marathon's long enough. Come on.
Yeah. Well, it
Two
is
and a
a
half,
marathon.
2.5 of them in at the same time. No.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. A couple of things that come to my mind there. I mean, I've only ever done 100k. I did the Isle of Wight, and I did it with my wife Michelle, who some people
Mhm.
listening to this may know, and we did it with a few other people on the way, and then a chap called Darren who done it. This is in the Isle of Wight challenge. He's done it, I think, 8 times or something, and this was his eighth. So he was quite experienced, and it was so good to be able to do it with him. And I can't imagine there were some people who did it on their own the first time they were doing it, and I I'd have to take my hat off to them, because I just don't know how you find the mental fortitude to keep going in those little dark moments that you have when you're on your own. But yeah, there are plenty of people who do it. So fair play to them. And I suppose the second thing I was going to say is, well, you lied, didn't you, Owen? Because that wasn't the end of your ultra marathon experience, and you got hooked, and before you knew it, you were doing another one, and it was I think the next one you did was an even bigger one, wasn't it?
Yes. I mean, yeah, having promised myself that I would never do an ultra again, a post came out on Facebook from Go Beyond that there was this amazing new event,
Yeah,
a 5-day ultra in Nepal, and the wording of it and the pictures used in it, and I was hooked immediately. And as soon as I saw that post, I was running it.
yeah,
I had to. I didn't even have to get permission, as it were, from my wife to do it, because it to and fro a little bit, and it was a matter. I just said it was a matter of, well, I'm running. She said, "Yeah, I know you. I know you are. I knew you all the way along. Off you go and do your silly run." So, but I guess, you know what? It really started years before that post,
right,
which is a bit strange. Because it was in Nepal, it really resonated with me. And the reason I say that is we go back to my favorite places for running in the UK. And one of them is in the Brecon Beacons.
yeah,
Where there's a quite a quite a large number of Gurkhas are there in that area, either serving or retired. And my favorite restaurant is called the Gurkha Corner in Brecon.
right,
Years and years ago, I'd also done a decorating course, and one of the fellow students there was an ex-Gurkha, and lovely, lovely chap. And so somehow or other, that course, the Brecon Beacons, my restaurant, and Nepal were already sort of swimming around in me.
yeah,
Then this thing came up, and it was like, well, that's made for me. It's going to be hellish tough, but I've got to go. I've got
yeah,
to do it. So I may have lied to myself.
yeah. Well, I
But
think you,
when wonderful opportunities arise, you have to take them.
yeah, yeah, we're very good at that as runners, aren't we? Actually, of getting to the end of certain races and going, "I'm never doing that again," and then a couple of days later, or weeks or months, we're signing up for all kinds of ridiculous
Well,
stuff
yes,
again.
yes, we are.
So how was Nepal? Because I imagine it was like unlike anything you'd ever done before. Because you can do trails in the UK, but doing them through the foothills of the Himalayas in the heat and altitude that you get out there is presumably something completely different.
Yeah, I mean, fortunately, we weren't at any altitude that would cause difficulties. It was high, but it wasn't impactful.
Okay.
It's in the lower foothills, so we're not talking snowline or anything like that. The heat, it was about 20 degrees or so, so not overpowering. I think the difficulty was the fact that we were carrying 12 to 14 kilos on our backs, because we had all our food, water, bedding, and what have you. Fortunately, for each night we were out on the trails, the organisers did put tents up for us, so that we didn't have to carry tents. Everything else we had with us.
Yeah.
The combination of that weight and how much steeper the trails were than I thought they would be, with a regular sort of 20-ish degree heat, which was pretty, although not hot, because quite a lot of it was dusty trails and there was a lot of reflection off the bright dust, was really, really draining.
Hmm.
Most, for me, not being an expert, and just being your average Joe runner, couldn't run uphill, because I just couldn't run uphill. It was too damn steep. And I couldn't run downhill because it was too damn steep. And in the Nepalese foothills, there's not much else between. So there was a lot of power walking,
Yeah.
and a lot of counting to 10, just getting through, getting the breathing in, out, in, and just plodding, and just and it sounds horrible, just getting through it, but surrounded by this amazing scenery and wonderful people. So that was what made it tough, but it also, looking back on it, was what made it fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I suppose that's one thing that we find when we do these more extreme events is, oh yeah, they're hard, but getting through it is what makes you go, oh, I did that, and I did that in this amazing place with these amazing people.
Yes, and on that, I think a key thing that was said, it was the end of the second day, when I was struggling. I had a quick chat with Simon, the race director, who was out there in his Jeep following us, and with us every night, and there at the beginning and end. And he said, "Don't forget, there are two types of runner out there. There are your competers, and your completers."
Yeah.
And there's no way I was going to be a completer, and nor was I going to give up. And actually, I learned so much about ultra. It's not necessarily ultra running, but it's getting through an ultra. An ultra in itself, you don't have to run it. It's a hell of an event in its own right. Run it, walk it. I mean, most of it I walked, but I've still done it, and I'm still delighted that I went. And would I do that one again? Probably not, but I wouldn't mind doing one somewhere else.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that's really interesting, actually, and it is something that you tend to find with ultra runners. It goes back to what you were saying earlier about times suddenly becoming less important. I mean, there's these elite people out there who do things in silly times, and they care about it, and good on them. But for most of us normal people, the big thing that when you're talking to me about something like Nepal, I'm hearing that you did 123 miles over 5 days through the Himalayan foothills. I'm not.
Yeah.
My first question then is not going to be, well, what time did you do it in on day one, Owen? I don't care.
No, not at all. No, I mean, there was only one point when we talked time, and that was on the middle day, which is always the toughest day. And there was one comment, how long do you reckon it will take us? It was, I reckon 10, just to give us an idea. I reckon 10 hours, give or take half an hour or so.
Yeah.
And that was it. That was the only time was mentioned.
Yeah.
And we were pretty accurate. I think we were about 15 minutes out on the day, but it wasn't it was irrelevant. It was a beautiful day.
What sort of feeling does it give you when you get to the end of something as epic as that?
Really, I think once we got through the third day, and then I knew there was two to go. It was going to be the fourth day was tough to get through, but I wasn't looking forward to the last one because I knew it would be the last.
Yeah.
And finishing it was oddly quite sad. And there was massive elation that I'd achieved something unbelievable for me. As you say, 123 miles over 5 days through the Himalayan foothills with all your kit. It's like, whoa. Yeah. And that you can't. Yeah. It is big, and you tend to forget that. It's really big. But it was really, really sad knowing it was over, because every hour out on the out there was wonderful, and crossing that finish line was like, yeah, it's fantastic. I've done it. Oh, that's it then. Oh, it's over. And there definitely was an element of sadness in it.
Yeah. I mean, you hear that quite a lot from runners who do extraordinary things, because it's not just those, in your case, 5 days that you're doing. It's all the training, all the work that you put into it to get to that point, and probably to some degree all the years that you've had before that, going back to training for Florence and so on, and you're like,
Mm.
this has brought me to this point, and oh my god, it's amazing, and then you almost just fall off a cliff, I suppose. And yeah, you do hear sometimes about runners going downhill quite a bit, which is why I guess we then enter the next big race.
Yeah. There was a point where it was like, I never want to run again. But that didn't last, because if you don't run again, you're not going to be able to have these experiences again. And that's why you run. So, okay, you got to get back to it. But there was talk during the race, in the evenings and during there, about other events people had done and extraordinary things. I think of the seven of the seven of us running, 4 had already done Marathon des Sables, and I think 1 was planning on it.
Yeah,
I'd been banned before I went from it. So that was never on the cards. But I realised quite early on that I was in what you might call exalted company with. I mean, Tan, who I think you've had on this show, is a veteran of 70 plus ultra marathons.
Yeah.
Others have done. We have multi Ironmen. We've got people who've done. I think 4 of them had done MDS. Emily's a multi Ironman, and it's like, hang on a minute, I've never done anything like this. I've pootled along the Ridgeway once a few years ago and said never again, and here I am in the pool with all this lot. What am I doing here?
Yeah.
But as I said to myself, everybody here was where I am now. At one point, everybody had their first multi-day. Yeah. And it just happens to be mine, and that's great.
Yeah, definitely. Just had a lovely message from a chap, Nigel Booth, who says, "Great to listen to the story behind it all, and so inspirational. Keep it flowing." So thank you, Nigel. And it is inspirational, I think, Owen. And so I suppose the keep it flowing part of that leads me to ask, what's next? What's coming around the corner for you?
Coming around the corner, I booked talking MDS and having been banned from doing it. All of a sudden, the chance of doing a 2-day event in Morocco came up at the beginning of the year. So I immediately signed up.
Yeah.
Not long after getting back from Nepal, actually, I thought, right, while it's still fresh, I'll go for it. And this year has been a whirlwind of change in terms of work and all other sorts of stuff. And the training just has not happened. So up until now, somehow or other, I've always managed to finish a race. This one I'm seriously concerned about, because I'm about 6 or 8 weeks away from it and nowhere near ready. But I've got to go. And it's a matter of, I could be in trouble here. And it's the first time I felt like that, and I'm sure it's not the first time a runner's felt like this or been through the oh crap moment, that I'm just not ready. Somehow or other, I'm gonna have to pull my socks up and get there in time. And maybe speaking today is just the moment to flip that switch and say, get off your backside and get on with it, because I do want to enjoy it.
Yeah.
But that's what's next. That's what's next. Yeah, I mean, it's something that's it's a place. It's an environment that I've never been in. I've been in jungles, I've been up mountains, but I haven't hit deserts. And I thought, yeah, let's hit a desert, and now it's a little bit closer than it should be.
Yeah.
So it's not going to plan yet, but I'm sure I'll be able to pull out of the hat somewhere. I'll get myself there. How we get on when we arrive, we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah. I'm sure you'll be fine, Owen, because I think one thing that's come through in this chat so far, and we're slowly running out of time, is kind of the resilience you've shown from the start of getting through things like Florence for the first time when you weren't even going to be a runner, to obviously your sobriety journey, by the way, which Joe Harden, our my fellow podcast host sends his congratulations to a fellow sober runner because Joe went through that himself. But then to doing Nepal when you didn't want to, so or when you didn't want to after the end of the other one, if you know what I mean. So,
but yeah, having done most of the Stones, I was never going to do anything so ridiculous in my life. That was just what I've done it, but why would anybody want to do this?
Yeah,
and then I realised when the next thing came along, this is why.
Yeah. And just to kind of finish off, I suppose I wanted to touch once again on your sort of journey to sobriety and the role that perhaps running has played in helping you get there. And just, I mean, I know you want to raise the awareness thing. I know you don't necessarily want to give hard and fast advice, but what would you say to other people who are in a similar situation to where you were to perhaps help them get over their addiction, move to that next step, and whether, how running helps you, I suppose?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are two things, if that's all right. The first is try everything that's out there. There are all sorts of methods, there are all sorts of books, there are all sorts of podcasts. Give them all a go. Because as I said early on in the show, I have my own personal jigsaw puzzle. Each piece in that puzzle comes from a different source, from a different suggestion, from Alan Carr to AA to a podcast by whoever, and they all come together. Now, my jigsaw is my jigsaw, picked from all those bits. If I hadn't tried all of that, I wouldn't have found all the bits for my jigsaw puzzle.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing I would say, is give it all a go, because you'll pick something up from everything, and which will help you build your own personal jigsaw puzzle. And when the last piece falls into place, you'll be in a position where you can quit.
Yeah.
The second thing I would say is you've just got to be hard with yourself and understand. For me, willpower is a no-no. The reason I say that is you wake up in the morning full of it, saying, I'm going to quit this, I'm going to do this. By the time you get to the evening, it's all gone because you've had to deal with all sorts of shit in the day. By the end of it, there's none left. And that's when you want the drink, and that's when you've got the least willpower or none at all. So don't look at willpower as a way. Instead, if you're using willpower, the way I look at it is you have a desire to stop drinking.
Yeah.
Now, while you've got the desire to stop drinking, that's not good enough. You need to get to a point where you've made a decision to stop drinking. At that point, you're a non-drinker. And if you're a non-drinker and you've made a decision, you don't need willpower.
Because it's you.
It's you. You are a non-drinker. You've had a desire and you've struggled. You've made a decision, and now it's a different ball game. Easier said than done, most definitely. To get to that point, do the research, build your jigsaw, then make the decision. Or almost for me, it was made for me when my friend popped into the pub and dropped it in. That was the decision was made for me. So it made it a bit easier. But that's how I would see it, and how it worked for me. Now, it may work for some people, it may not, but that's from experience. And from having lived through it, that worked for me, and it may do for anybody else who's interested.
Absolutely fascinating stuff, Owen, and thank you so much for sharing that. We have about a minute and a half left, and I just wanted to give you very quickly the opportunity to talk about the couple of books you've done. I mentioned Losing My Addiction earlier, but there is another one on Nepal, all about the Nepal journey. Tell people about that, and tell people where they can find these couple of books.
Okay, so Losing My Addiction, they're both available on Amazon. First, Losing My Addiction is my take on various stuff, alcoholism related, and how I got through it, and a few gnarly stories on the way. 862 to Kathmandu is the next book, published at the beginning of this year. I called it 862 to Kathmandu, one, because it rhymes and sounds good, and two, because it's the number of miles that I ran in training before setting off. So it was 862 training miles to get to Kathmandu. And it's really the story of getting to the journey into Nepal, of the 5 days running, what happened there, who we bumped into, what we saw, what happened, the smells and the sights and the sounds and the hubbub of the city and the beauty of the countryside and the wonderful people. And it's really a flavour of what it's like to run a 5-day ultramarathon, from personal experience. And that's what 862 to Kathmandu is all about, because it was just so extraordinary that I had to put pen to paper.
Fantastic. Owen, that's brilliant. Thank you so much for joining us today on Running Tales, part of the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network. Folks, go and check out Owen's books. Get hold of those, because they will no doubt be absolutely fascinating to you if you enjoyed this conversation, which hopefully you did. If you did, please give us a positive rating or review wherever you listen to it. And we'll see you again next week. In fact, 2 weeks' time. I should always get that right, for another Running Tales podcast. In the meantime, check out all the other wonderful stuff on the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network. And thank you to Owen, and thank you to everybody else for joining.